Thank you. So wonderful to share in this all together and then to continue in prayer for these blessed families. Well, today our scripture is from Matthew, and it's chapter 4, verses 1 to 11.
Sorry, there's a typo. We're in Ephesians 5, 1 through 14.
Well, thank you. I think I can find that. Let's see. Genesis, Exodus. Okay. That's great. Checking me here in my Bible drill. Okay, Ephesians 4, 5. Okay, thank you. Okay. Ephesians 5, 1 through 14. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper in among the saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, or who is covetous, that is an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore do not become partners with them, for at one time you were darkness, but now children of light. Walk as children of the light, for the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true. And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it's shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret. But when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. For anything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Thank you.
Okay, I am 100% certain that somewhere I put a typo in or didn't delete an old passage or something, and Corey is a professional reader that can go on the fly. So thanks, Corey. Sorry about that. Where's my clicker? Hey, just as we go, again, a reminder of the announcement. Tonight starts the first of our series, these third Sunday night Kingdom Conversations, where, if you're interested in coming out for an hour and a half, well, not an hour and a half, I don't think, but an hour or so, we're just going to take a little bit of time, worship the King, talk about this theme of the kingdom, which really runs cover to cover throughout the Scripture, and then have not round table, but that sort of feel, conversations about what it means to be aligned to the kingdom of Christ and yet live in the midst of the world with its other kingdoms and its ways of going about kingdom. And in particular, we're going to have some what could be difficult conversations about, just some of the things that, we see and we hear about, in the news or whatever. It gets talked about in family dinner times or whatever. And there's just been a desire to have that conversation here as your spirit-filled brothers and sisters and to learn from one another and to hear. So if that has interest to you, join us tonight, 6:30, right back in here. And then the next third Sundays for a couple months. The other main interest of that is really to get at this question, what does it mean for us to live lives that give witness to the presence of this other kingdom? And who this other king is? Right, which is actually connects us to where I want to go in this passage, right? The lectionary that we've been following has us in Ephesians 5 today. And sort of we're picking up right where we left off last week. Like last week, we were in John, and we were at that great conversation that Jesus is having with the Samaritan woman at the well, right, at Jacob's well. And he's telling her, look, I am offering to you in relationship with me this richly soul-satisfying life, even to you who has suffered much and who has lived life like with desires and hopes and dreams like constantly unmet and constantly frustrated. Like even to you, I can offer to you in relationship with me something that is rich and deeply satisfying. And then we also talked about how, and we saw like right after that conversation, the woman, he has a conversation with his disciples, his followers, who are coming and trying to get him to eat. And he says a similar thing to them. He says, guys, I have food that you know apparently nothing about, which is richly satisfying. And it's doing the will of my Father who sent me. He's saying, look, like this, what's happening right here, do you even see this? This woman is finding rich life. She's running into town and telling all these townsfolk who are on the outskirts of the kingdom of this rich life, and they're finding it. And man, that is far more satisfying to me. Being a part of that is so much more satisfying, whatever food you're going to offer me here. And we just talked about that, that concept that's really all throughout the New Testament, that to really enjoy the richness of all that Jesus is for us, it's not just to hoard him in this sort of like personal, private relationship, but actually to join him in the things that he is doing and bringing life and healing and wholeness into, or in other words, it's to join him or be with him as he is on mission in the world. And today we're just sort of talking, we're fleshing that out a little bit, and maybe to set it up, like we'd say, okay, even just that concept there, when we talk about being on mission with Jesus, maybe to set it up, like there is something I've noticed, there's a way that we think about mission and living lives of witness, and it's nuanced, it's different than sometimes the way the Bible talks about it. Sometimes I feel like we get our mechanics for how to do mission and witness more from maybe like corporate America or political America, maybe. Like we try to, we think we should build churches that are appealing and attractive to, perhaps the religious shoppers out there. So we make it more therapeutic and feel good, and we make it feel kind of familiar and comfortable, or we try to offer a buffet of programs and services, again, that are going to appeal to these religious shoppers out there, maybe. Or, maybe if we think about, this idea of witnessing, maybe we sort of have this idea of kind of like a marketing pitch that I have to go through, a sales pitch, like a 5-point sales pitch, like a Romans Road that I have to go to, or maybe even worse, like we get this notion, and you see this in dangerous places in the church, where we have this idea that the way I'm going to participate in mission is I leverage something so that the church can get into positions of power. And from power and strength and might, we are going to coerce, strong arm, this culture into becoming more the kingdom, whatever that is, all this strange stuff. And don't get me wrong, there is an importance to thinking carefully about church and how we say and talk with others. But the New Testament has a very different, not a very different approach, but what I'm seeing so often in the New Testament is this idea that actually the way I am sending you on mission is that you would live lives that are provocative, or that you would live lives that are subtly subversive to the surrounding culture that is driven and animated by its own values and its things that it prizes and runs after, right? You're supposed to live a life that has a different value at its core, and which then overflows into a life that just looks different and is provocative and is subversive. And that's, I think, what he's getting after in this, just to let you know where I'm going here. I think we understand how this works. This past week, I had opportunity to go hang out with Vera and Gerhard Hoytas. An older couple. Most of you probably don't even know them. They're in their 90s, not able to come out here and worship. But just dear members of Grace Church, followers of Jesus. And so they're in a assisted living place, down towards Glen Mills, and I was hanging out with them. And one thing that just stood out to me, the thing that I probably came away with most was watching the way Vera and hearing the way Vera cares for Gerhard. Right? Gerhard, I think, is he 95? 95 now, right? And, it's getting to that age where, organs are starting not to function the way they normally do, and the body's, not able to do the things that it normally does. And then there's Vera, she's in her 90s, 92, 91, right? 92 in May. And her body bears the marks of a 92, right? She can't do the things that right? She has to walk with a walker. It's very slow and deliberate. But what you see in Vera is like her whole life is whatever she can do in service and love to Gerhard, right? They're in this assisted living place where they would offer, they've got these diners downstairs. It's nice and fancy, and they could bring meals up, any time of day. But Vera knows what Gerhard likes, and so instead of just picking up the phone and calling up these other things, like she wants to make for him at least twice a day the meals that he enjoys, and she wants to do it as an act of love to him. Or, man, Vera would love to be here and probably could make it out here with us this morning, or she was talking about how much she misses the Wednesday morning women's Bible study and fellowship. Man, she would love to be there, but she can't pull herself away from Gerhard. Even though she's got nurses that could come in and care for him, she wants to be the one there to care for him and to love him to the very end, whenever that is, right? So to watch Vera, this woman who's walking with her and is, right, to see her literally leverage her body to help Gerhard up out of his chair and then to move him to where, like, it gets me emotional even just to think of it. And the other thing it does, it's convicting to me. Like, it makes me wonder, do I love Amy with that much sacrificial resolve? Man, I think I'm the best thing in the world when I make the coffee at night and whatever and prepare it. And so, best thing since sliced bread, whatever. So I leave that place. I go in trying to be some sort of force of encouragement, and I come away more encouraged, more convicted. I'm never going back there again. No. Right? You know how that works. Like you're around marriages that seem to have this freedom and joy and intentionality with one another that it's provocative to you and it's subversive. It challenges you. Am I doing that in my home and in my marriage? Or you're at work, in a high-stressed, frenetic workplace, and then you come across this person who always seems calm and is patient and is not easily angered and anxious about things. And you're like, there's something appealing about that, and there's something convicting and challenging about that. It provokes you. Again, I think this is what Paul is going after here. It's what he's calling us to live lives that do, or that live in that way. So let me just walk you through it. And maybe at the end, if we have time, I'll ask the question too, what does Lent have to do with any of this in the season of Lent? Okay, but so first off, so it's always hard to jump into a book. I'm a big picture thinker, so it's hard for me to jump into the weeds, Ephesians 5, without considering it in light of the whole. So, I always tell people, the book of Ephesians, not a tame book. And it bugs me that sometimes we make Ephesians into this tame, domesticated, docile book. First half is all about theological instruction. Second half is all about practical implications or whatever. Yes, it is all of that. But in this bigger conflict, or bigger drama of cosmic conflict, right? It's a story of God at war and against principalities, rulers, powers of darkness, it's called in the book. And it's the story of God's climactic victory in the resurrection of Jesus. And what is happening as a result of that victory, right? Literally, new creation that is being wrestled from the grips of these powers of darkness. New life, resurrection life that is starting now to be enjoyed and experienced by his people. All right, so if by chance you're here this morning and you're new to the Bible in any way or have never read the book of Ephesians, biblical anthropology 101 is that we are deeply spiritual people. We are not just biological processes and biochemical reactions and material, matter, emotional. Like, wait, there's something richly, deeply spiritual about who we are. We are embodied souls, right? And not only are we richly, but all of creation has this real spiritual component to it. And in that, there is conflict. The Bible would say, like if you look out at the world and grieve over the things that the majority of all of us, either in the church or outside, like that we grieve over, that this presence of, injustice or segregation, discrimination or violence and warfare or broken homes and broken families or lives that seem in the grip of something that is literally eating their life, like to grieve that, like the Bible would say you're missing something at best, or you're naive at worst if you don't realize there is a spiritual component to that. There is conflict behind that. And part of the language that the Bible uses, and Paul does here, you saw it, is this light and darkness stuff. Right? And his challenge to anybody is, look, you can live in one of two realities. You can live in this new creation, this new life, this new humanity that Jesus is wrestling from the powers of darkness through his victory and his resurrection. Or you can live in this reality of a life that is animated, that is fueled and driven, and perhaps even fully in the grips of powers of darkness. And so it's like this invitation, like to take that seriously and to come out of that. And then it's the calling to all the followers of Jesus. Your lives are supposed to be a light to that, like that expose that reality, that there is light and there is darkness, and there is one way a life should look like if it's in the light versus a light that is, led by, enslaved by darkness. So that's his overarching interest here in chapter 5. He starts to get specific about that. So he's saying the church that witnesses to the victory of Christ's kingdom and to the light is a church that, above all, is going to live in imitation of God, right? That's verse 1. Be imitators of God. And then as we saw all throughout that season of Epiphany, right, where do you go to see the clearest image of who the invisible God is? You go to this Jesus, as he is revealed in the Scriptures. And where do you see most poignantly, at least according to the book of John, like the glory of Christ on display? It's when he's lifted up in his act of self-giving, self-sacrificial love for the life and the redemption of his people. Right? And so verse 1, be imitators of God and walk in love, verse 2, as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Right? Be imitators of that. Be imitators of Christ, who didn't live a life that was ruled by selfish passion or lived a life, aimed at what he deserves in life. Thank goodness he didn't. But he lived a life of self-giving, self-emptying, self-sacrificial love on our behalf. Okay, and then he gets more specific about what that life is going to look like, or in more particular, what that life won't look like, or what that life will abstain from or not be participants in, right? And he gives some real practical, he names a few of them, like verse 3, sexual immorality, all impurity, or covetousness must not even be named among you as is proper among the saints. Okay, so we could say a couple things about that trio. Sexual immorality, all kinds of impurity, covetousness, or greed is another way to frame that. One thing we could say about that trio right there, like if you go look in ancient cultures, especially like in ancient cultures, like a lot of the empires and the nations and peoples, like they had lots of different gods, whether it's the Egyptian Empire or Babylon or Syria or Greece or Rome, right? You got a pantheon of all your gods. And you know what the most famous ones were, or the ones that were most popular, or the ones that we have more lasting, testimony to throughout the ages? It was the gods of fertility and the gods of power and strength and security. Right? The gods who would bless your wombs and your families with life and would bless your fields with life and harvest and abundance and good things, right? And then the gods of power and strength that would give you security to keep that life secure. And then all these gods had their litany of impure things that they would demand of you for their services. Right? And so this is nothing new what Paul's doing. Like all throughout the scriptures, especially in the prophets, like God is warning his people, hey, stay away from the gods of the nations, right? The fertility gods, the gods of might and power that lure you and tempt you with this, that, and the other. Right? And his people are constantly running into their arms, and they're constantly engaged in all sorts of impure and detestable practices to win the favor of those gods. This is nothing new. I think the other thing that we could say about these things, sexual immorality, all kinds of impurity, greed and covetousness, another thing that links them all together is this drive of taking, consuming, and seeing all things like in service to my desires, passions, lusts, dreams, goals, whatever it is. Right? That's what sexual immorality in its truest sense is. Right? Sexual immorality in the purest sense in the scriptures is this idea that I would take the body, the life, perhaps the very soul of another and just consume that, use that to fill my personal desires, lust, whatever, as opposed to what the biblical picture of it is this wonderful gift that spouses can then give back as an act of self-giving love to one that you are committed to in the context of covenant and marriage, right? Again, like sexual immorality, the exact opposite. Forget commitment, forget covenant, and we just take and we use and we consume the body, the person of another. Commitment, no, forget about that, whatever. Like we're just taking and using and consuming. Right? Same thing with covetousness and greed, right? It's looking at what I have in life, the sweet things that God has blessed me with, and instead of joy and delight and contentment and thankfulness for that, like my eyes are always on the horizon, seeing that across the way that I don't have, and wanting to take that and to consume that and find some momentary satisfaction in that, whatever it is, right? And don't miss what Paul's saying here. That's idolatry. Like that covetousness, all of this, it's running after those other gods. It's living life that are just fueled by your desires, your passions, your love. The very antithesis of how Jesus lived his life. And that's why he says, just to say a few more things about it, this is not the kingdom of Christ. A life that is lived in pursuit of those things, that's not the kingdom of Jesus. That's that other kingdom. Right? That is that other reality, that other humanity that is ruled and fueled by other things, darker things. Things that would lure you. Things that would enslave you. That darkness, that kingdom, that stuff, that life in relentless pursuit of the gratification of desire or whatever as the means of satisfaction. That is so enticing. It'll enslave you. And the thing is, it will slowly rob you of the life that your Creator would have for you. And just over time, tear down, dismantle, destroy your very life. And probably the lives around you that you care very deeply about. Right? The other thing that it says about it, it's because of these things, this is verse 6, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. And I wish I had time really to unpack that idea of the wrath of God in Paul. And maybe I'll just say it this way. It's actually far more scary than we think it is. Because when we think wrath of God, we tend to think of some future thing. like that, like this later thing at the great day of judgment or after death, maybe we face up with the wrath of God. So maybe I have some time, and right now I can get things, or whatever. But actually, when you read through Paul's letters, and I haven't gone back and checked this, but I would be inclined to think when he talks the wrath of God, he's talking much more in the present tense. Like I think about like Romans 1, when he writes his letter to Rome, and like this massive, epic, central book in Paul, like chapter 1, how does it start? For the wrath of God is being revealed now against, again, every form of ungodliness and disobedience. Right? And how does he go on to say there? Even though I have made my glory known to my creatures, to my people, yet they have exchanged the glory of the immortal, invisible God for like these cheap knockoff glories of all these other little gods. And so 3 times in chapter 1, how is that wrath of God like unleashed? Like what does God do in that? He hands them over 3 times in chapter 1. Like this is what the wrath of God does. He hands them over to those desires. He hands them over to these gods that they're running after because they think there's where life is found. There's where my security be. He hands them over. He hands them over, it says, to sexual immorality. Hands them over to impurity. He hands them over to their desires. Like that's part of that wrath of God. And man, that should be, if you know yourself, that should be a scary thing, that God would ever hand me over to the pathway of my desires, instead of be in the pathway of desire of my Creator for me, that he would hand me over to my desires, or even more, and you get this language, that he would hand me over to these darker entities that would pull me there, and as I'm now running headlong after desire into the darkness, right, what's happening? I'm becoming more enslaved. I'm becoming farther away from whatever life, good life, my Creator would have for me. And yeah, slowly over time, my life is being eroded and deconstructed and torn down. And again, maybe along with it, those lives around me that I care very deeply about. And one of 2 things can happen in that. You can be blind to it all and not see what's actually happening here. Right? We can be so deceived to think, yeah, but I'm on the pathway that's going to lead to life and satisfaction and wholeness. Or our hearts can be so hardened in that we don't want to hear about other pathways and another God who would call me out of that into something else. And, if any of you have had the unfortunate circumstances of a loved one who's been an addict and you've had a conversation with an addict and you've been pleading with them for something, you know exactly what I'm talking about there, don't you? That we would be blind, deceived, and hardened, right? So that's one of 2 things that happens. It could be all that. Or the other thing that could happen is that maybe in that you feel that something is not right here. Or that maybe even you would feel there is something hellish about this. I have been handed over to right now something hellish. Nate and Katie had us sing Boldly I Approach. Boldly I Approach. And there's actually an old hymn, Come Boldly to the Throne of Grace. Lyrics go, Ye wretched sinners, come and lay your load at Jesus' feet and plead what he has done. You bankrupt souls who feel and know the hell of sin within. Not the hell of sin out there or the hell of sin off in the future, but you bankrupt souls who feel and know the hell of sin within. Come boldly to the throne of grace, and the Lord will bring you in. Right? Man, so if by chance you're here today and you're running headlong after desire, and you think, man, that's the pathway to pathway, but there's something on you that says there's something hellish in this. Man, hear the invitation to morning to awake, get out of that, come into the light and into the kingdom, and you'll find far more freedom and joy and depth of meaning and purpose in Christ and his victory. And to the rest of you, your life is called to expose that. Do you see there's something actually merciful in the wrath of God? He hands them over Like a parent hands a child over to the natural consequences sometimes of their persistent rebellion and disobedience, so they would feel the sting of it. So that maybe in the feel and the sting and the hellishness of it, there's some sense, what am I doing? Right? So there's this mercy of God that is coming as his wrath is and he's handing them over. And for those who maybe feel it and are looking for something else, the life of the faithful church is supposed to provide that. They should see in the church a freedom, a joy, this self-sacrificial love of Jesus that has power, and so it should be provocative to them. Real quick, there's one other thing. It's just this one little line. In the midst of all of that, let it be no filthiness with foolish talk. We didn't even get into all of that, like the speech that comes out of a life that's lived in pursuit of all those things. But instead, let there be thanksgiving. Like that right there is the other example. That's the counter. That's what the life that is not all of that should look like, right? There's the life that's lived in rampant pursuit of desire and is never satisfied, is never content, and is constantly going to take and consume people and bodies and things. And then there's a life that's thankful. A life that knows and sees all that has been given and is so richly thankful for it. Right, this is why I think, those of you who know the book of Ephesians, why there's like these lists of benefits that are yours. Joe, you can quote it for me, can't you? Romans 1, that big long sentence of all that is ours in Christ. We are adopted as dearly loved sons and daughters. We have the gift of redemption and forgiveness of sin. We have this eternal, unshakable hope. And we have the down deposit, the guarantee of the Spirit who begins to work that new life experience in us. That's why, the times in Ephesians where you see Paul praying for the church. What is he praying? I'm praying that you have eyes open to see what you have. Like this incredible hope that belongs to the saints. Or the immeasurable power that is at work in you, the same power that raised Jesus from the dead. Or at the end of chapters 2 and 3, man, I pray that you would have some eyes to grasp just how wide and how deep is the love of Christ. Because as you see that, that's what fills you with the fullness of God. And why does he want you to see that, to know all that's yours, so that your life would be one of thanksgiving? And out of that thanksgiving, man, freedom. I don't have to go and consume everything else and other people and all that. I'm so thankful, and I'm free to actually give my life in Christ-like sacrificial love. Man, I am free to actually be content and to be at peace and to have confidence in all that is even yet to come. And a life that does that is like a lighthouse. That's the image that I have. It's provocative. It shines light, as he says, right? Take no part in unfruitful works of darkness, but expose them. It's shameful to even speak of the things that they do in secret, but when anything is exposed by light, it becomes visible. Anything that becomes then visible is then, we hope, becomes light. Right, so that's the goal, a life that is marked by thankfulness and self-sacrificial love and joy that shines light on darkness and exposes it. And this is why, just real quick, I think there's this false notion in life that, what I do with my life, well, that's me. Or in a Christian circle, sometimes we hear that's between me and God. And, and I'll work that out with God. But no, it's bigger than that. There's a whole dying creation at stake. There's a whole people that are held in the balance of whether we live lives of light or lives of darkness. It's why your holiness matters. And it's why we don't take our sin lightly. Right? To live a life that is in the grips of sin, right, on the one hand is sad because it's coming under the grips of all that darkness. But on the other hand, then too, it's like, how dare we? Right? Because it's to present to the watching world at best an impotent Christ who is of no value. Right? If all the other world sees outside of us is a life that's ruled by the same passions and desires and ambitions and things that the rest, right, we're not offering Jesus to them as anything that is far greater or far more powerful. That's why it's so important that we take inventory of our life which maybe, there it is. That gets me to the last slide, right? This is what Lent has to do with any of this. Lent is the season where we do that. We take a little bit more inventory of where, I've got these same desires. Or yes, I have been delivered by the resurrection of Christ into this new life, this new existence, this new reality, light, but that job isn't finished yet, and I can still feel the pull of these other things. And Lent is a season where maybe I identify that, and we fast a little bit, and what fasting does is it brings that to surface, brings those desires to the surface, and then we say, okay, what am I going to do with these desires? Do I gratify them? Or do I come to Jesus? Do I come to the throne of mercy in my time of need? Or I was talking with, in a message to our grace group this week, fasting, I'm actually finding more and more Lent to be the season where I strangely find myself, I think, just a little more thankful than other seasons of the year. Because when you deliberately go without, like if anybody who's here who's ever done fasting, and if you're doing fasting right now, you know what I'm saying. Like to skip a meal or to maybe not eat during the daytime, like food all of a sudden becomes awesome. and not fancy food, like soup and homemade bread is like the most amazing thing in the world, and you're so thankful for it. And the rest of the year, I feel like if I don't have a steady diet of cheesesteaks and barbecue and crab legs, I'm going to die. Right? This is the season where, all the things that Jesus has given to me, right? Or like as I feel the lack and if I am drawn to Jesus in prayer, and if I find the sweetness of Jesus in that, you see how there's so much more to be thankful for. So Lent brings the desire to surface, it cultivates thankfulness, and then lastly, too, Lent is never an end in itself. Where does Lent end up? Easter. Takes you right through Maundy Thursday, right, when Jesus is washing the feet of his disciples, showing his glory, getting down in the dirt. Takes you through Good Friday, where Jesus is lifted up in all of his glory. And there you see, that's love. And then it takes you right to Easter, the death knell to the powers and principalities, spiritual forces of darkness that rage in the heavenly places and all throughout the corners of creation. And that's the power he desires to unleash in you and send you out with. And that's that closing. Therefore, it says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Chances are that was a quote from an old hymn in the ancient church. And it actually brought to mind to me a song that we used to sing. It was not here. We sang it at a church I was at before. It's a Lauren Daigle song, actually, from one of her, I think maybe her earliest album, Dry Bones Come Alive. Any of you guys know that song? Through the eyes of men, it seems there's so much we have lost. Looking down the road where all the prodigals have walked, one by one the enemy has led them all away as slaves. But we know that you are God, yours is the victory. We know there is more to come than we may now yet see. And so with the faith you've given us, we step into that valley unafraid, and we cry out, the chorus, come alive. We call out, dry bones, come alive. We call out the dead hearts, come alive. Come out of the ashes, let us see an army rise. Right? And that's a song that we would sing almost as a prayer to the relationships that God would send us to during the week, but then it was a prayer to us as well too. Get up. Awake, get out of the realm of the dead, and Christ will shine on you and empower you to go back into that realm with a life that calls out to dry bones and to dead hearts, come alive. That's awesome stuff, and may God do it in you in the name of in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. I invite the worship team to come forward, and the last thing that we do as part of our service is an act of humility and dependence. Dare we go at Lent as an end in itself? Dare we go at mission and life on our own strength, our own ability to fast, to go without, or whatever? Every step along the way, if we're not coming to Christ, the source of our life, the soul-satisfying stuff, the soul-empowering stuff, we're dead in the water. And so we come to the table before we dare walk out those doors. We come to the table praying that God would draw us back to that act of love on our behalf in his death and resurrection. And we come to the table praying that the Spirit of Christ would meet with us, strengthen us, equip us with what we need to go out and be that light in wherever he sends us. And so you don't have to be a member of Grace or a regular participant here. If your family are here, you are welcome to come to the table. If your desire is to be fed and nourished by Christ, and if there's where your confidence is, if your confidence isn't in Jesus, you're not sure, you're new to this, you don't know where you are, hey, great that you're here, and man, keep pressing into that. The Bible would warn you to withhold, like don't come in lack of sincerity. But maybe even if you feel for the first time today, there is light and life, and I want to go in that direction, come to the table in humility and let it draw you into the love of Christ and the power of his Spirit. We have ushers that will direct traffic. I'll invite you to stand. We're going to sing Before the Throne of God. And then as we've all received, we'll come back. I'll ask a blessing on the bread and the cup together, and then we'll partake in remembrance of him.